"Don't come, Mom. You'll embarrass me with your bald head." My son sent those words at 11:47 on the morning of his own wedding, and I read them twice before I set the phone down on the bathroom counter without a sound. I had walked out of my chemotherapy session 4 hours earlier. Drip unfinished, nurse calling my name down the corridor behind me. To get dressed for a ceremony I had contributed $47,000 to fund, holding a gift I had chosen with love and wrapped with my own hands. But I took one slow breath, looked in the mirror at the bald woman staring back at me, and said 3 quiet words. 30 minutes later, Marcus, his bride, and the officiant were kneeling at my front door. My name is Dorothy, and I am 68 years old. I want to tell you that before I tell you anything else, because the age matters. Not in the way people sometimes mean when they say age matters. Not as an excuse, not as a limitation, but as a context for what it means to have built something across 6 decades and then to have watched it be treated as though it had no weight. I have been building things my entire life. That is what I know how to do. I built a bookkeeping firm from a single rented office in the spring of 1989. 1 room, 1 desk, 1 telephone, and 16 years of accounting experience I had gathered at other people's companies before I decided I was done working for other people. I worked 17-hour days for the first 3 years. I drove to client meetings in a car that needed new brakes and ate lunch at my desk and answered my own phone and did the filing myself every Friday afternoon because I could not yet afford a second person on payroll. By 1995, I had 4 employees. By 2001, I had 12. By the time I considered passing the day-to-day operations to my senior bookkeeper, a steady and brilliant young woman named Priya Sharma, who had been with me for 6 years, the client list filled 2 binders, and the firm's reputation in our town was one I had earned with nothing but consistency, precision, and the willingness to tell people things they did not always want to hear. I built a home on Laurel Creek Road where my son Marcus was raised. Not a grand home. 3 bedrooms, a back garden, a kitchen large enough to cook in properly, and a table large enough to gather around. I planted roses along the side fence the summer we moved in, and I have tended them every spring since, and they are, I think, the most honest thing I have ever made with my hands. The home was warm. I am certain of this. Not perfect. No home is perfect, but warm in the particular way that comes from a person who understands that a house becomes a home through the daily, unremarkable acts of being fully present in it. And I built, over the course of 45 years, a marriage to a man named Gerald who was the best decision I ever made. Gerald, who argued with car mechanics on my behalf and lost gracefully, and came home laughing about it. Gerald, who got up at 5 every morning to make coffee and left mine on the counter with exactly the right amount of milk and never once needed to be thanked for it, because he was not doing it for thanks. He was doing it because that was who he was. Gerald, who was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in the fall of 2009 and was gone 6 weeks later. Gone so fast that the space where he had been still felt occupied for months after, as if the house was waiting for him to remember something he had forgotten. He was 53 years old. We had been married 29 years. When Gerald died, Marcus was 22. He had just graduated, was living in a shared apartment across town, working a first job in IT support that he was competent at but not passionate about. In the first week after Gerald's funeral, Marcus came over every morning without being asked. He sat at the kitchen table and we drank coffee together, and sometimes we talked, and sometimes we did not say anything at all, and it was enough. More than enough. I held on to that. I thought it was a promise about the kind of man he was going to be. He met Claudia 3 years later. She was 25, worked in marketing for a regional firm, had opinions that she expressed with a certainty she had not quite earned yet, and a mother named Renata, who I would later come to think of as the original architect of a certain particular worldview, which was that resources flow from those who have them toward those who want them, without any obligation of accounting in between. I did not dislike Claudia immediately. She was bright and assertive, and she loved Marcus with an intensity that I recognized as real, even if it was the intensity of someone who had decided what she wanted and intended to have it. I watched, and I said very little. Gerald always said I watched the whole room while everyone else was talking. He meant it as a compliment. I have always taken it as one. What I watched, in the first 18 months, was my son beginning to change his shape. Not dramatically. Not in ways that anyone would have labeled in the moment as significant. He stopped calling on Sundays, which had been our custom since he moved out, and started calling on Tuesdays, briefly, efficiently, in the tone of a man checking something off a list. He stopped coming to Sunday dinners at the house. At first, occasionally, then routinely, then not at all, replaced by occasional lunches on neutral weekdays when Claudia had other plans, and he seemed to have a window of time that he could not fill with anything else. I cooked for those lunches as I had always cooked. Roasted chicken, fresh bread, the lemon cake he had loved since he was 7. He ate, he thanked me, and he was gone within 90 minutes. I noticed. I tucked it away. I am a woman who keeps careful accounts, in more ways than one. In 2016, Marcus and Claudia moved in together, and I helped. I drove a rented truck across town on a Saturday in August when it was 91 degrees. I carried boxes from the truck to the second-floor apartment 12 times, which I counted because by the 7th trip, I had developed a system for breathing through it. I assembled a bed frame in their bedroom at 11 at night while Claudia stood in the doorway in a clean white t-shirt, directing, and Marcus handed me parts from the box. I did not mind. I was glad to be useful. I was glad to be needed, which I understand now was the more accurate thing. I wrote a check for the security deposit, $3,200, because they were short by that amount and asked if I could help. Marcus said he would pay it back when he got his next raise. I said there was no rush, because I meant it. There was no rush. He got his raise. He never paid it back. I never mentioned it. I put it in a mental folder labeled Love and moved on, which is the accounting system I had been running for years and which I can tell you, with the clarity of hindsight, was not serving me. The engagement came in April of 2018. Marcus called me. Called, did not come over, which I noted, to tell me on a Tuesday afternoon. I said everything a mother says, and I meant most of it. The following week, I met them for dinner, and Claudia extended her hand across the table to show me the ring and then said, in the tone of someone making an announcement rather than starting a conversation, that they were thinking Italy. A destination wedding. I smiled. I looked at Marcus. He was reading the menu. Italy did not happen. What happened instead, several months of planning later, was a renovated estate 40 minutes from town. A beautiful property. I will admit that, with manicured grounds and catering, they had spent weeks selecting and a venue coordinator who sent invoices the way some people send holiday cards. The catering minimum was $85,000. The room rental was $14,000. Marcus brought me the invoice in a manila envelope and set it on my kitchen table and looked at me with the specific expression I had come to recognize in him. The one he wore when he was asking for something he suspected I might decline. I did not decline. I wrote a check for $47,000, which I understood to be my contribution, which they had decided together and informed me of afterward. I did not comment on the process. I filed it under Love. By now, the file was considerably heavier, but I was not ready to call it something else. Not yet. The diagnosis came in October of 2019. I was at a routine mammogram, the kind you schedule on an ordinary Tuesday because your doctor recommends it annually, and you have always been responsible about such things. And I was sitting in the paper gown reading a magazine when the radiologist came back with a look on her face that I recognized immediately, because I am not a woman who has made it 68 years by failing to read rooms. Stage 2 breast cancer. The oncologist, Dr. Renata Okonkwo, told me this with the brisk, direct professionalism of a person who has learned that her patients are best served by clarity, and I was grateful for it. She told me the prognosis was good if I committed to treatment, and I said I would commit, and I meant it the way I mean every commitment I make, absolutely and without reservation. I did not tell Marcus for 2 weeks. I told no one for 2 weeks. I needed that time to be alone with it, to grieve what I needed to grieve, to make the arrangements that needed making, to decide how I was going to carry the thing before I showed it to anyone else. This is how I have always worked. Gerald understood it. He never pushed me to process faster than I was processing. He would just be in the next room, available, waiting for when I was ready. I told Marcus on a Tuesday, on the phone. There were 4 full seconds of silence before he said, God, Mom, are you going to be okay? And something in the quality of his alarm, the rawness of it, the boy underneath the practiced adult, made me believe for that moment that we were still who we had been at that kitchen table after his father's funeral, that he was still that person. I'm going to be fine, I said. I wanted you to know, he told Claudia. Claudia texted me heart emojis and the phrase, "sending love and light your way, Dorothy." And that was, I would discover, the approximate extent of her engagement with the 11 months of treatment that followed. Chemotherapy began in November. By January, I had lost my hair. I had known it was coming. Dr. Okonkwo had explained it. I had read everything I could find. I had purchased 2 silk scarves and a wig that was genuinely convincing, and that Barbara immediately declared made me look like a news anchor, which she intended as a compliment. But the morning it began coming away in the shower, in my hands, in thick, soft handfuls, I held the safety bar with both hands and I cried for 5 minutes. Only 5. Then I dried off, put the wig on, made my coffee, and opened the quarterly report I needed to finish before Friday. There was no merit in staying in the bathroom longer. The task would not wait, and the crying, I decided, would keep. I want to tell you about Barbara now, because she deserves a proper introduction, because she has been the fixed and certain point of my life for 41 years, and without her the story I am telling you would have had a different ending. Smaller, quieter, less decided. Barbara Kowalski is 66 years old. She retired after 32 years of teaching 5th grade, which she will tell you was the greatest professional honor she can imagine, because children at that age are still fundamentally unspoiled and just beginning to understand that the world requires something of them. She laughs too loudly at her own jokes and is the first to tell you this and the last to stop doing it. She moved into the house across the street from me in 1984, and on her second day, she rang my doorbell to return a package that had been mistakenly delivered to her address. And we stood on my porch and talked for 2 hours about everything and nothing in particular. And by the time she left, I already knew she was a permanent fixture. Gerald said she was the sister I had been born without. That was accurate then, and it is accurate now. In February of 2020, 4 months after the diagnosis and 2 months into treatment, Barbara came to my house on a Wednesday evening with a casserole, a bottle of wine she knew I couldn't drink because of the medication, and a deck of cards she never took out of the box because it became clear within 20 minutes that what the evening required was not cards. We sat at the kitchen table. I told her everything. The $3,200, the $47,000, the Sunday dinners that stopped, the Tuesday phone calls that replaced them, the text messages I had started screening because Claudia had developed the habit of contacting me only when she needed something, my chicken piccata recipe emailed in June, a dentist recommendation in August, a form she emailed in September without explanation, asking for my signature with no context provided, and 3 follow-up texts when I did not respond within 2 hours. I told Barbara all of it. She listened without interrupting, which she can do when she understands the situation calls for it, though it requires visible effort on her part. When I was finished, she poured more wine into her own glass and said, "Dorothy, what are you going to do?" And I found that I already knew. I had known for weeks. I just needed someone I trusted to ask the question in the right voice so I could hear my own answer. "I'm going to watch," I said, "and I'm going to be ready." Being ready is not a dramatic thing. It is a quiet thing. It is the discipline of sustained attention when every instinct tells you to simply hope for the best and trust that it will be better tomorrow. I have run a business long enough to know that hope is not a strategy. Attention is a strategy. Documentation is a strategy. Patience is a strategy. I made 3 phone calls in the early spring of 2020. The first was to Howard Bloom, my accountant of 15 years, a compact, careful man who returned calls within the hour and charged what he was worth without embarrassment about it, which I had always respected. I asked Howard to compile a complete and thorough accounting of every financial transfer I had made to Marcus since Gerald's death in November 2009. Every check, every cash gift, every covered expense, every repaid loan that had never been repaid, dates, amounts, running total. Howard said he would have it to me within the week. It took him 4 days. The total was $214,000. I had known, in the general way that you know things you have not wanted to look at directly, that the number was significant. But seeing it on paper, the columns of it, the steadiness of the accumulation, 11 years and $214,000 in one organized document, was something different from knowing it abstractly. I sat at my kitchen table with that document for an hour. I made no decisions during that hour. I simply sat with it. Then I put it in a folder in the locked drawer of my desk, and I made the second phone call. The second call was to Patricia Lynn, my attorney of 10 years, A woman of precise language and impeccable timing who had drafted my will, handled the legal structure of my business, and earned my complete confidence through a decade of never once telling me what I wanted to hear when what I needed was the truth. I asked Patricia to come to the house. She came on a Thursday afternoon, and I laid out for her, in clear and organized terms, what I had been observing, what I was concerned about, and what I wanted to do about it. She listened with the focused stillness of someone who has heard many kinds of stories and knows which ones are serious. "You want to restructure," she said. "I want to protect myself," I said. Quietly, completely, without anyone knowing until I decided it's time for them to know. She nodded. She was already writing. The third call was to Dr. Okonkwo's office. Not about my treatment, but about my timeline. I needed to understand, with as much honesty as medicine could provide, what the coming 12 months looked like for me. She told me what she could, which was more than some doctors would have offered and exactly what I needed. I thanked her, made my next appointment, and drove home with the car windows down, even though it was still March and cold, because I needed the outside air to come in. Over the following 6 weeks, I restructured everything. I transferred the ownership of the business into a trust that Patricia designed for my specific circumstances, with Priya designated as the operational trustee responsible for day-to-day management and a board of 2 trusted advisors to oversee major decisions. The house, which I had already placed in a separate trust the previous year for routine estate planning reasons, required only a beneficiary update. Patricia drafted a full revision of my will, which I read word by word 3 times before signing. She created an advance healthcare directive. She designated Barbara as my healthcare proxy and my financial proxy in the event of incapacity, with explicit written language establishing that Marcus was not to hold decision-making authority over any aspect of my affairs. I signed everything in front of a notary on a Tuesday afternoon in April, which happened also to be a day I had a chemotherapy session, rescheduled by 2 hours to accommodate the appointment, because there is always a way to manage 2 things at once if you are sufficiently organized. Marcus did not know any of this. Claudia did not know. No one knew except Patricia and Barbara and Howard, and they were not people who told other people things that were not theirs to tell. By August, chemotherapy had ended. I was in the monitoring phase, which meant blood draws and imaging, and the cautious, provisional optimism of a doctor who is not given to extravagance. Dr. Okonkwo told me at my August appointment, "The results are good, Dorothy. I want you to know that." I wrote it down in the small notebook I kept for medical information, and I held it carefully, the way you hold something you want very much to be true. The wedding was scheduled for the 2nd Saturday in October. I had, months earlier, bought a gift. I had considered writing a check, the obvious thing, the expected thing, but I decided against it. I wanted to give something that could not be spent, something that was about who we were to each other rather than what I was able to produce on demand. I found a first edition of a novel Gerald had loved and pressed into Marcus's hands at 18 with strict instructions to read it before forming any strong opinions about the world. I had a photograph printed and framed. The 3 of us at the shore, the summer Marcus was 12, Gerald squinting into the sun, Marcus brown from a week outside, me with my hair in a braid I haven't worn since. And I enclosed a cashier's check for $30,000 with a note that said simply, "For your future. From your mother, with all my love." I wrote the card 4 times. The first 3 drafts were too much. The 4th was right. I sealed it and put it in the box and wrapped the box with blue paper and a white ribbon, and I set it on the hallway table to take with me on the morning of the wedding. I had a supplemental treatment session scheduled for early that Saturday morning, a follow-up infusion that Dr. Okonkwo had arranged as part of my ongoing protocol. I had timed it carefully. The session was scheduled to begin at 7 and end by 9, which would give me ample time to go home, change, and arrive at the venue well before noon. The drip started at 7:15. I sat in the familiar chair, the one near the second window, the one I had come to think of as mine in the way that you claim small territories in places you are required to return to regularly. Carla, the nurse who had attended most of my sessions and who knew me well enough by now to ask real questions and receive real answers, checked my chart and gave me the look that meant everything was proceeding normally. I had brought a book. I was reading. At 11:03, my phone lit up on the arm of the chair. A text. "Marcus, don't come, Mom. You'll embarrass me with your bald head." I read it once. I read it twice. I set the phone face down on my knee and looked out the window at the parking lot and the gray October sky above it. Carla looked up from her chart. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said. I sat with it for 3 minutes. The drip continued. The machine made its small, steady sounds. I thought about Gerald in the morning coffee. I thought about Barbara on my porch in 1984. I thought about the folder in the locked drawer of my desk. I thought about the photograph of the 3 of us at the shore, which was now inside a wrapped box sitting on my hallway table, waiting. I thought about everything I had given, willingly, freely, because he was mine and I was his, and that had meant something. And then I stopped thinking, and I listened to what I already knew. I asked Carla to remove the drip. She hesitated, because the session was not complete, and I explained quietly that I had a family matter requiring my attention, and that I would call Dr. Okonkwo's office Monday morning to discuss the missed portion. Carla looked at me for a moment with the expression of a woman who understood that something significant had just happened inside me, and who was professional enough not to ask about it. She removed the drip. I thanked her. I put on my coat, picked up the wrapped box, and walked out to the car. I drove home in 11 minutes. I walked to the bathroom mirror. I stood in front of it without the wig, as I had been standing in front of mirrors for months, and I looked at the woman there, bald, clear-eyed, upright, familiar. And I said 3 words, "I see you." Then I picked up my phone and called Barbara. "He sent you what?" Her voice went very quiet, which is how I know Barbara is genuinely furious. When she is casually annoyed, she is the opposite of quiet. But when something actually strikes her as monstrous, she drops to almost nothing, which is, in its own way, more alarming. "I need you to come," I said. "I'm already in the car," she said. And she was. She was at my door in 4 minutes. She stood in the entryway and looked at me. Still in the clothes I had planned to wear to the wedding, the wrapped box on the table beside me, the quiet of the house around us, and she did not say anything for a moment. Then, "Tell me what you want to do," I told her. She sat down at the kitchen table. She asked 2 questions. The first was practical. The second was the one that mattered. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said. She picked up her phone and called her nephew David Kowalski, who has practiced real estate and estate law for 20 years and who, as Barbara sometimes says with her particular smile, owes her a number of favors she has declined to collect until now. She said, "David, I need you at Dorothy's in 20 minutes. I'll explain when you get here." She hung up and looked at me. He arrived in 19. He was in a blazer he had clearly put on in a hurry, and he had a legal pad under his arm and the focused expression of a man who trusts that Barbara does not summon people without good reason. He sat at my kitchen table, and I told him everything in clear sequential order. The trust, Patricia Lynn's work, the documents in my desk, Howard's accounting, and the text message currently on my phone. I placed the phone on the table between us so he could read it. David asked the necessary questions. He wrote for a while. Then he looked up and said, "Everything you've already done is solid. What you're describing for today, I can help you with that. It will take about 2 hours. It took 93 minutes. While David worked at my kitchen table with his laptop and his legal pad and 3 calls to his office, I cooked. Not elaborately. There was no time for elaborate. But I made coffee and I made soup from what I had on hand, because cooking has always been where I do my best thinking, and there was thinking to do. Barbara sat at the counter and drank her coffee, and we did not talk much. There was nothing that needed saying. Everything that needed to be done was being done. We had arrived, she and I, at the still place on the other side of the emotion where the decisions live. My phone rang at 2 in the afternoon. Marcus. I let it ring. 2:43. Claudia. Let it ring. 2:43. An unknown number that I would later learn was Renata, Claudia's mother, texting to ask where I was, that Marcus was asking for me. I did not reply. At 3:08, David put down his pen and said, "Okay." I brought him coffee and sat down, and he walked me through everything he had prepared. 3 clarifying questions, 3 precise answers. I signed where he indicated. Barbara witnessed. David countersigned. He looked at the documents for a moment before he put them in order. "This is airtight," he said. "If anyone challenges it, they'll be fighting uphill for a long time." "Good," I said. He left at 3:22. I put the documents in the folder with Patricia's papers and Howard's accounting, and I placed the folder in the locked drawer of my desk. Then I sat down at the kitchen table, folded my hands, and called Marcus. He answered on the second ring. There was music in the background and voices, and the particular ambient brightness of a reception room in its early hours. His voice when he said "Mom" was careful, guarded. The voice of a man who understands that a call has a shape before the words begin. "Hello, Marcus," I said. "I've been trying to reach you. I'm glad you. Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm at home. I'd like you to come to the house, you and Claudia. And whoever officiated the ceremony, if that's possible." A pause. "Mom, we're in the middle of the reception." "I know that. I'm asking anyway." Silence. Then, "Is something wrong? Is everything?" "I'll explain when you get here. I'll expect you within the hour." I hung up before he could say more. Then I went to the kitchen and made a pot of tea and sat down to wait, which is something I am good at and have always been. They arrived in 51 minutes. Marcus's car pulled into the driveway with the white wedding ribbon still attached to the antenna, fluttering as he stepped out in his suit with the tie loosened and the particular look on his face of a man who has been laughing too hard to cover something he cannot quite name. Claudia came behind him in her wedding dress, white, with a lace overlay that was genuinely beautiful. Her face arranged into composure, the way a careful person arranges a room before company arrives. Behind her was the officiant. A man I did not know, perhaps 35, in a dark suit, with the expression of someone who has agreed to something he does not fully understand. Barbara was in the upholstered chair by the living room window, the chair she has sat in for 20 years when she comes to my house, hands folded, face entirely neutral. I was at the kitchen table. No wig. My head exactly as it was, exactly as it had been since the hair came away in January. Bare, clear, entirely mine. The wrapped gift box sat on the counter behind me. The folder was on the table to my right, closed. Marcus walked in first. He stopped in the doorway and looked at me. Really looked. The way you look at something you have been partly not looking at for months. And something crossed his face that I have thought about many times since. Not shame yet. Not guilt yet. The early, thin precursor to both. The hairline fracture before the break. "Sit down," I said, quietly. "Both of you. Please." They sat. Pastor Glenn. I learned his name later. Took a chair near the door with the gentle diplomacy of a man who understands his role is peripheral. I opened the folder and placed Howard's accounting on the table where Marcus could see it. He looked at it without touching it. "That is a record of everything I have given you since your father died," I said. 11 years. The total is $214,000. Howard Bloom compiled it. You know Howard. Claudia's eyes moved to the paper. Something in her composure shifted, very slightly, like a frame that has moved a fraction of an inch and not quite settled back. "I am not telling you this because I want repayment," I said. "I gave that money freely because you are my son and because I believed that was what love required. I have no regret about the giving. What I have is clarity about what I received in return." I took my phone from my coat pocket and placed it on the table between us. Marcus's text was visible on the screen. "Don't come, Mom. You'll embarrass me with your bald head." Marcus looked at it. He did not look up for a long time. "I left my chemotherapy session this morning," I said, "to get dressed for your wedding. Not because anyone asked me to. Because you are my son. I had a gift for you. I had a card I wrote 4 times until the words were right, and I had 45 years of love for you that I was bringing to that room." I let the sentence rest. "And you sent me that." The room was very quiet. Claudia was still. "I am not here to make you feel worse than you already feel," I said. "I am here because I want you to understand what I have done today while you were at your reception, and what it means for all of us going forward." I lifted David's documents. I did not hand them over. I held them. I have restructured my estate completely. My business is in a trust. My home is in a trust. My accounts are organized in a way that reflects the decisions I have made about the future and the people I trust with it. I set the documents down. You are not in any of it, Marcus. Not as a beneficiary. Not as a trustee. Not in any capacity. Barbara is my healthcare proxy and my financial proxy. My estate will go, when I die, to 3 organizations that have mattered to me for years, and to a scholarship fund in your father's name at the university he attended. Claudia moved first. "You can't," she began. "I can," I said, not sharply, simply. "And I have." Patricia Lynn drafted the foundational documents. David Kowalski, 20 years of estate and property law. Completed the work today. Everything signed this afternoon. Witnessed and notarized. I looked at her without any particular heat. You are welcome to have your own attorney review all of it. I have nothing to hide, and I expect no challenge to hold. Marcus had not spoken. He was looking at the table. His jaw was working in the way I had recognized since he was 4 years old, when he was fighting something he did not want to let out in front of anyone. I want to say something else, I said. I am not angry. I want you to hear that as a true thing, not a performance. I am past angry. I am sad, genuinely, deeply sad, in the way you are sad when you understand that a version of something you loved was not entirely real. And I am also very clear, clearer than I have been in years. I paused. I am not doing this to punish you. I am doing this because I love myself enough to stop pretending that what has been happening between us is something other than what it is. Marcus looked up. His eyes were wet. Mom, he said. Marcus, I'm sorry. His voice was very quiet. I don't have an explanation for the text that makes it better. I don't. I was in my own head and I was. It was wrong. It was cruel and it was wrong, and I knew it was wrong the second I sent it, and I didn't. Marcus, I said it gently, but with enough weight that he stopped talking. I believe you are sorry. I believe you mean it, right now, in this room. What I want is not an explanation. What I want is for you to understand what it cost, not the money. The accounting is in that folder, and it has a number, and the number is real, but it is not the thing I am talking about. I waited a moment. The thing that has no number is 45 years of being your mother, of getting up for you in the night, of sitting with you when your father died, of giving and giving and giving because I loved you, and love was supposed to mean that none of it required accounting. Until today, I learned that it did. He nodded. He pressed the back of his hand against his eyes. Claudia had gone entirely still. She was looking at her lap. Her wedding dress was pulled around the chair, and her hands were folded in it, and she was quiet in the way of someone who is genuinely taking something in rather than waiting for a turn to speak. I watched her for a moment. Claudia, I said. She looked up. Her eyes were wet too, which I had not expected. I have nothing against you as a person. I want you to hear that without qualification. I hope you and Marcus build something honest and strong together. Something that doesn't need to be funded by someone else's silence. I paused. You are starting a life today. Start it clearly. She said nothing. She nodded. Just once, but it was real. Pastor Glenn, in the corner, cleared his throat, very softly, the sound of a man reminding the room that he is still present while having the grace not to speak. I stood up. I went to the counter and picked up the wrapped box. This is yours, I said, and set it on the table in front of Marcus. I bought it before this morning, before the text. I bought it because I love you. That has not changed, and it is not going to change. I looked at him. What has changed is the terms under which I go forward. I am 68 years old. I have a cancer in remission that may or may not stay that way. I do not have time. I will not spend the time I have, continuing to give from fear or to accept less than what I am worth. From this point forward, I will give from choice, and I will require, not ask, require, that the people in my life treat me with the same basic dignity I have always extended to everyone in mine. Marcus stood up. He stood up and walked around the table and put his arms around me, carefully, with the caution of someone who has suddenly and fully understood that they are holding something irreplaceable. And he held on. I held on too. Because love does not disappear when it has been handled badly. It becomes something more specific, more honest about what it needs and what it will not accept. He pulled back after a moment and looked at me, at my face, at the head he had told me would embarrass him, and he did not look embarrassed. He looked like someone seeing something he should have been looking at all along. How are you? He said. The treatment. How is it going? Dr. Okonkwo is cautiously optimistic, I said. I am taking cautiously optimistic. He almost smiled. The shape of it was exactly his father's. Good, he said. Mom, I'm sorry. I know, I said. Go back to your reception. It's your wedding day. He looked at the box. Can I open it now? At home, I said. When it's quiet, they left. All three of them. Marcus with the box under his arm, Claudia with her wedding dress lifted in both hands, Pastor Glenn with the expression of a man who has witnessed something he will be thinking about for a considerable amount of time. I watched the car back out of the driveway and the white ribbon flutter as they drove away. Barbara came into the kitchen. She poured coffee for both of us and set mine in front of me and sat down. "How do you feel?" she said. I sat with the question for a moment. I looked at the table, the window, the October garden beyond it, still holding its color. "Free," I said. She nodded. She drank her coffee. Outside, the roses along the side fence were their final red of the season. Marcus called the following Sunday. Not Tuesday. Sunday, as he had done for years before he stopped doing it, in the morning, and the call lasted an hour. He did not mention the estate. He did not raise the documents or the accounting. He told me about the honeymoon, asked about my next scan, and then at the end of the call, quietly, said, "I opened the box last night. I waited." "The book," he said. "I didn't know he kept that edition." "It was in his study," I said. "I always meant you to have it." "The photograph too." A pause. "I forgot about that summer." "I didn't," I said. There was a long silence, the comfortable kind, the kind we had not had in years. "Mom, I want to try again, if you'll let me." "I'm already trying," I said. That's what today is. Things have not become perfect. I do not want to tell you a simple story when the true one is more complicated than that, because you deserve the complicated one. Marcus and I speak every Sunday, most Sundays, which is close enough to what it was. Claudia and I have reached a careful detente that is not warmth, but is not hostility either, and I believe in time it will become something more genuine. If we are both willing to let it, which I think we are, she is not a villain. She is a young woman who learned a particular set of expectations and applied them to the nearest available resource, which happened to be me, and neither of us examined it closely enough until we had no choice. That is a story about two people, not one. The estate remains as I structured it. Patricia Lynn has counseled me to leave it unchanged for at least 2 years, and I intend to follow that. I am not a rigid person. If things change genuinely and demonstrably, I have the capacity to change things too. But I am no longer in the business of giving in advance of receiving. That model of love served no one. I am in remission. I say this not with the triumphalism of someone who has defeated something, because cancer is not the kind of thing you defeat so much as the kind of thing you renegotiate your relationship with. It becomes part of the story, present in the margins even when it is not the main event. I see Dr. Okonkwo every 3 months. I sit in the familiar chair and Carla asks if everything is okay, and I tell her the truth, which most days is yes. Some days it is more than yes. Some days it is exactly what I did not know I had been waiting to feel. My hair is growing back. It is fine and close and entirely its own thing. Something between what I was before and what I became in the interval of treatment, which strikes me as about right. I have stopped wearing the wig most days. It is a decision I made because I wanted to make it, and because I found that the face in the mirror without it is one I recognize completely. It is the face I have always had. I was simply not looking at it closely enough. I think about Gerald. Not with grief anymore, or not only with grief, with something softer and more grateful, the way you think about something you were lucky enough to have had. I think he would look at me across the kitchen table and say, in his direct and unembellished way, "You did good, Dorothy." And I would tell him it took me too long. And he would wave his hand the way he always did, because Gerald was not a man who spent time on regret, and we would drink our coffee, and the silence between us would be enough. If you are listening to this and you recognize something in it, a pattern, an accounting you have been keeping in a folder labeled love, a quiet feeling that the care you have been pouring out has been received as though it costs nothing and owes nothing in return, then I want to speak to you directly, one woman to another, without softening what I have learned. You are allowed to keep what you built. That is yours. You earned it through years of work and sacrifice and sustained attention, and you do not owe it to anyone who has not treated you as someone worth keeping. You are allowed to stop giving from fear and to start giving only from genuine, clear-eyed choice. You are allowed to say, not scream, not beg, simply say, that you expect to be treated with the same dignity you have always extended to every person in your life. These are not radical demands. They are the most ordinary things in the world, and if the people around you receive them as radical, that itself is important information. I did not do what I did to punish my son. I want that to be clear, because punishment is not a thing I believe in as a life strategy. I did what I did because I finally, fully understood that protecting yourself is not a betrayal of love. It is, when done with honesty and stillness and the patience to choose your moment, one of love's most honest expressions. You cannot give from an empty vessel. You cannot teach the people who love you to value what you offer by accepting, in silence, the way they are already treating it. And you cannot wait for someone else to decide when the moment has come. That decision is yours. It has always been yours. Choose your moment. If you haven't yet, you still can. If this story stayed with you, I would love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me, what would you have done in my place? And from where in the world are you listening? I read every message, and you mean more to me than you know. For more stories like this one, like this video, and subscribe. There is so much more waiting for you. With love and respect. Until next time.